Hey guys, this is Mrs. Donahue, and I am reading the article I Am Adam Lanza's Mother for you. Some of you may find it a little easier to hear me read it. I'm going to stop and break down some of the areas that I want you to think about. If you missed class, if you're running late, this could be really helpful for you. So without further ado, the article I Am Adam Lanza's Mother by Lisa Long. And it starts with an explanation in italics to kind of give context to what she's writing about. At the time she published it, that wouldn't have been necessary because the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting was very big news. So everyone knew about it, but she knew that the article would sort of live longer than the immediate context of the news, and so she gives the context. Friday's horrific national tragedy, the murder of 20 children and 6 adults at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, has ignited a new discussion on violence in America. A lot of logos there for something that is horrific, as she said. In kitchens and coffee shops across the country, we tearfully debate the many faces of violence in America. Gun culture, media violence, lack of mental health services, overt and covert wars abroad, religion, politics, and the way we raise our children. There's a little bit of pathos in there, but there's more tone. There's some sarcasm. Clearly, one of those is not the answer, but maybe a little bit of all of them is the answer. Lisa Long, a writer based in Boise, says it's easy to talk about guns, but it's time to talk about mental illness. I like that because it gives just enough ethos for her. It's like, why is she writing? It's easy to talk about guns, it's time to talk about mental illness. Now, the focus of the lesson will be ethos. What gives her the right to talk about this? And what is this? So far, she's going to talk in some way about mental illness, but you don't know why she has the credibility to do so. Now, while every family story of mental illness is different, and we may never know the whole of the Lanza's story, tales like this one need to be heard, and families who live them deserve our help. 3 days before, 20-year-old Adam Lanza killed his mother, then opened fire on a classroom full of Connecticut kindergartners, my 13-year-old son, Michael, name changed, missed his bus because he was wearing the wrong color pants. "I can wear these pants," he said, his tone increasingly belligerent, the black hole pupils of his eyes swallowing the blue irises. "They are navy blue," I told him. "Your school's dress code says black or khaki pants only." "They told me I could wear these," he insisted. "You're a stupid bitch. I can wear whatever pants I want to. This is America. I have rights." "You can wear whatever pants you want to," I said, my tone affable and reasonable. "And you can't wear whatever pants you want to," my tone affable and reasonable. "You definitely cannot call me a stupid bitch. You're grounded from electronics for the rest of the day. Now get in the car and I will take you to school." I live with a son who is mentally ill. I love my son, but he terrifies me. Now, when we were writing in cold blood essays, a lot of you ignored dialogue. When writing nonfiction and recalling specific words someone said, there is no need to include dialogue. But doing so, one, it provides this sense of specificity. This is exactly what was said. In addition, when you are giving dialogue, you then have to give the tone with which it's delivered. So when she's writing what her son said, she writes what her son said to show his aggression versus her, where she says, "I was affable, reasonable." She keeps a level head. And then she spaces physically on the page and makes its own paragraph, those 3 sentences. "I live with a son who is mentally ill. I love my son, but he terrifies me." A few weeks ago, Michael pulled a knife and threatened to kill me and then himself after I asked him to return his overdue library books. His 7 and 9-year-old siblings knew the safety plan. They ran to the car and locked the doors before I even asked them to. I managed to get the knife from Michael, then methodically collected all the sharp objects in the house into a single Tupperware container that now travels with me. Through it all, he continued to scream insults at me and threatened to kill or hurt me. That conflict ended with 3 burly police officers and a paramedic wrestling my son onto a gurney for an expensive ambulance ride to the local emergency room. The mental hospital didn't have any beds that day, and Michael calmed down nicely in the ER. So they sent us home with a prescription for Zyprexa and a follow-up visit with a local pediatric psychiatrist. We still don't know what's wrong with Michael. Autism spectrum, ADHD, oppositional defiant, or intermittent explosive disorder have all been tossed around at various meetings with probation officers and social workers and counselors and teachers and school administrators. He's been on a slew of antipsychotic and mood-altering pharmaceuticals, a Russian novel of behavioral plans. Nothing seems to work. I give her a lot of credit for keeping the tone light here. There's a lot of subtle ethos building by dropping all of these names. One, these are things that people in the know would go to. But also she's showing that she's familiar with them, and she's doing it in such a way that says not only is she familiar, but on top of it, she feels that she has more knowledge than these people who have suggested it. Like, it clearly wasn't the answer, or there's not one answer. Also, the way she described how they had to solve the problem of her son threatening to kill her is they brought him to the emergency room. And then when he stopped flipping out, they kind of patted his head, gave him a box of pills, and said, go home. At the start of 7th grade, Michael was accepted into an accelerated program for highly gifted math and science students. His IQ is off the charts. When he's in a good mood, he will gladly bend your ear on subjects ranging from Greek mythology to the differences between Einsteinian and Newtonian physics to Doctor Who. He's in a good mood most of the time. But when he's not, watch out. And it's impossible to predict what will set him off. Several weeks into his new junior high school, Michael began exhibiting increasingly odd and threatening behaviors at school. We decided to transfer him to the district's most restrictive behavioral program, a contained school environment where children can't function in normal classrooms, can access their right to free public babysitting from 7:30 to 1:50 Monday through Friday until they turn 18. Nice commentary there. Giving information, doing so with enough tone to show you she has an opinion, right? The two things that we have to constantly ask ourselves is, what is her authority and what is her motive? And there's clearly some motive here to point out the deficiencies in the system. I wouldn't say the system is wrong or is completely off base, but it's deficient. It's not enough. When her son is displaying these behaviors, the choice is sending him to this restrictive kind of prison-like atmosphere when he's probably not really in need of something like that, at least mentally. Most of the time, he doesn't need it. But for the times that he's off, what are they meant to do? People don't have the resources to deal with him. The morning of the pants incident, Michael continued to argue with me on the drive. He would occasionally apologize and seem remorseful. Right before we turned into his school parking lot, he said, "Look, Mom, I'm really sorry. Can I have video games back today?" "No way," I told him. "You cannot act the way you acted this morning and think you can get your electronic privileges back that quickly." His face turned cold, and his eyes were full of calculating rage. "Then I'm going to kill myself," he said. "I'm going to jump out of this car right now and kill myself." That was it. After the knife incident, I told him that if he ever said those words again, I would take him straight to the mental hospital, no ifs, ands, or buts. I did not respond, except to pull the car into the opposite lane, turning left instead of right. "Where are you taking me?" he said, suddenly worried. "Where are we going?" "You know where we are going," I replied. "No, you can't do that to me. You're sending me to hell. You're sending me straight to hell." I pulled up in front of the hospital, frantically waving for one of the clinicians who happened to be standing outside. "Call the police," I said. "Hurry." Michael was in a full-blown fit by then, screaming and hitting. I hugged him close so he couldn't escape from the car. He bit me several times and repeatedly jabbed his elbows into my ribcage. I'm still stronger than he is, but I won't be for much longer. The police came quickly and carried my son, screaming and kicking, into the bowels of the hospital. I started to shake, and tears filled my eyes as I filled out the paperwork. Were there any difficulties with? At what age did your child? Were there any problems with? Has your child ever experienced? Does your child have? At least we have health insurance now. I recently accepted a position with a local college, giving up my freelance career because when you have a kid like this, you need benefits. You'll do anything for benefits. No individual insurance plan will cover this kind of thing. For days, my son insisted that I was lying, that I made the whole thing up so I could get rid of him. The first day when I called to check up on him, he said, "I hate you, and I'm going to get my revenge as soon as I get out of here." By day 3, he was calm, my calm, sweet boy again, all apologies and promises to get better. I've heard those promises for years. I don't believe them anymore. On the intake form, under the question, "What are your expectations for treatment?" I wrote, "I need help." And I do. This problem is too big for me to handle on my own. Sometimes there are no good options, so you just pray for grace and trust that in hindsight it will all make sense. I am sharing this story because I am Adam Lanza's mother. I am Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris's mother. I am James Holmes's mother. I am Jared Lochner's mother. I am Sung Hui Choi's mother. And these boys and their mothers need help. In the wake of another horrific national tragedy, it's easy to talk about guns, but it's time to talk about mental illness. According to Mother Jones, since 1982, 61 mass murders involving firearms have occurred throughout the country. Of these, 43 of the killers were white males, and only 1 was a woman. Mother Jones focused on whether the killers obtained their guns legally, most did, but this highly visible sign of mental illness should lead us to consider how many people in the U.S. live in fear like I do. When I asked my son's social worker about my options, he said the only thing I could do was to get Michael charged with a crime. If he's back in the system, they'll create a paper trail, he said. That's the only way you're ever going to get anything done. No one will pay attention to you unless you've got charges. I don't believe my son belongs in jail. The chaotic environment exacerbates Michael's sensitivity to sensory stimuli and doesn't deal with the underlying pathology. But it seems like the U.S. is using prison as the solution of choice for mentally ill people. According to the Human Rights Watch, the number of mentally ill inmates in U.S. prisons quadrupled from 2000 to 2006, and it continues to rise. In fact, the rate of inmate mental illness is 5 times greater, 56%, than in the non-incarcerated population. With the state-run treatment centers and hospitals shuttered, prison is now the last resort for the mentally ill. Rikers Island, the LA County Jail, and Cook County Jail in Illinois housed the nation's largest treatment centers in 2011. No one wants to send a 13-year-old genius who loves Harry Potter and his snuggle animal collection to jail. But our society, with its stigma on mental illness and its broken healthcare system, does not provide us with other options. Then another tortured soul shoots up a fast food restaurant, a mall, a kindergarten classroom, and we wring our hands and say something must be done. I agree that something must be done. It's time for a meaningful, nationwide conversation about mental health. That's the only way our nation can ever truly heal. God help me, God help Michael, God help us all. I really like that second part of her essay, that sort of last little more than a half. There's a lot of times where she provides plenty of ethos here. Real authority, what gives her the right to say this? The very clear way in which she walks us through the steps she has to take as the mother of a boy like this makes it clear, 1, this woman is not over-exaggerating her son's condition. 2, she clearly understands the ins and outs of the system. It was not the first time she has had to do this. That was most clear for me in the section where she was talking about the paperwork she had to fill out. The questions, were there any difficulties with? At what age did your child? She gives the first tiny part of the question because she knows how it ends. And that's why the ellipses is there. She's answered these questions and answered these questions and answered these questions. Even to say things like the names of all of the different shooters, that wouldn't necessarily seem like ethos in most cases, right? In some ways it sounds like logos because you can fact check those names. But in her case, it provides some insight into the fact that she has had to, in searching for answers for her own son, she has had to look up all of these other people. She could have chosen a lot of different people, but she chose them. And if you were to pull them up and look closely, there seems to be some similar alignments to what she talks about with her son and most of those boys that she mentions. She clearly did research, because after she's provided us with a lot of sort of softer evidence, the way she sets the scene, the way she talks about what the conditions are, the way that she describes the system she encounters and the problems with it, she then gives us a little more hard evidence. Ending on the criminal note is intriguing. It shows like how many normal average soccer moms have to consider whether their son has to be charged with a crime to get the health care he deserves. I don't know how many of us would make the trade. That they told her basically, your son has to be charged with a crime. Now, consider, as she sort of has laid out for you, what that means. To charge him with a crime, he obviously must commit one. The people he is immediately around and constantly threatening, the people most likely to be victimized by him, in order to give the system its crime that they need to charge him and give him, therefore, the care he needs. The likely victims would be the mother, potentially the 2 younger siblings, and then right underneath that is school. Those are the top 3 things he's around: mom, siblings, school. And they are the 3 things that she covers. I'm sure she has dozens, probably more than dozens, hundreds of stories of him that she could have shared, but those are the ones that she chose. And without kind of breaking it apart, all of those get covered. Did she have to talk about the other 2 siblings? It was both an ethos note and a pathos note, saying his younger siblings, 9 and 7, knew the safety plan. I'm not sure how many of you have casual safety plans in your house. You might have safety plans for something like a fire. If there's a fire, what do you do? If there's a break-in, what do you do? But she has a safety plan for what happens when your brother starts threatening to kill people in the house. And a 7 and a 9-year-old know how to do it. They know how to get into the car and lock the doors and not open them again. If you think about that situation, you're putting them in danger anyway, right? You're putting them inside a locked place in your house. God knows how long they would be in that car. And putting kids in a locked car has its own safety concerns, right? One can only imagine, if you think on it too long, they have to leave the keys in the car. You have to leave the keys in the car, or else what if the kids ran out to the car and it was locked and they couldn't get in it? But also you can't have the keys outside the car, because then the other kid could go find them. And hopefully that means the kids in the car have enough wherewithal to turn it on in the hot weather and put the air conditioning on so that they don't overheat, or in the wintertime to put the heat on so they don't freeze. Because say Michael's fit went on for hours, could they really be expected to just sit in the car? They would be exposed to the elements too much. In terms of motive, I think she's very clear. And one thing I want you guys to look at is how focused she is. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to talk about other topics. And it's easy to be more incendiary than she is. She could have gone much more pathos heavy. And I will say, I think she uses a decent amount of pathos. I think her humor and her pathos are going hand in hand here. But there's a lot to her subtle building of ethos that I think you guys will find more sort of use from, because some of you had trouble identifying more subtle ethos like this. If someone comes right out and says, these are my credentials, you guys have an easy enough time identifying it. But to see how she's dropping hints about it, and you're meant to just put the puzzle pieces together and build the ethos sort of on your own, that's what we're interested in. If you need any help on the document, please let me know. Don't forget we have extra help every day, except Mondays. Those are meeting days. And use the remind function if you need to kind of chat with me outside of the extra help hours. I usually get an alert about it, so it's pretty quick. Other than that, happy trails, kids.